Welcome to Charting Change in Legal. I am Ari Kaplan, an analyst who covers the legal industry, and I'm here with my co-host,
Caroline Hill, editor-in-chief of Legal IT Insider.
Caroline Hill. Wonderful to speak with you today. Thank you so much.
We discussed after last week that Ari should introduce or open up because he sounds so much more professional. Last week when I opened up, I just sounded like nails down on a blackboard. I went, "Hi,
They
welcome
say
to
Ari
Charting
has a
Change."
face for radio, and here we are. This is our 35th episode. And as always, thank you to our listener.
And our
And
last, our last, our last of the year.
the year-end recap.
Yeah, the
And
year
wow,
recap.
what a year it has been. Any
We
thoughts on recapping what we have experienced?
Well, we have charted some change. I think it's been a year of change and also of not change. So, in my end of year
There it
obligatory,
is. It's the year of change and not change. Ladies and gentlemen, you get what you pay for. I just want to say that's the kind of insight that we do here at Charting Change in Legal.
I've been going through in these end of year chats, these obligatory end of year chats, and I have to tell you, I love them and I hate them, right? Like I love. I think we get tired towards the end of the year, is the honest truth. You're very good. You don't leave it right to the end. You start thinking about the next year in advance. I think that's smart. I think when you get right to the end of the year, there's a palpable decline in energy. But so, and I've had lots of chats very recently about the year and advances. I've spoken to CIOs. I've spoken to the former president of the Law Society. I've spoken to some very cool people. Mike Haven, who is now, I announced a week ago to be global head of ops at Meta. So, and it's really interesting. So there's a lot of variation in people's take on the year in terms of how much change there's actually been. And I think from the law firm perspective, it hasn't been as quick as they thought it would be. So in 23, there was hysteria. Everyone assumed that in 24, there would be some kind of adoption, which largely is not the case from the people that I've spoken to. So 24 has been a year of preparation, sandboxing, to some extent still panic, thinking about priorities, sometimes attempts at POC, proof of concepts, etc., and then hitting against barriers because their data isn't good enough or their people aren't trained or what have you. So it's been a year of some experimentation, but I think a lot of it depends on the leadership. There's some firms that are still nowhere. And what's also perhaps lastly really fascinating is that I set out with this idea that it's the big firms that are doing something. And that's not always the case, actually. Like talking to vendors more than first-hand experience, because I tend to speak to the largest firms. They're saying, actually, no, there's some small firms that are doing some really cool stuff, not necessarily around the practice of law, but around the business of law. So it's also a dangerous time to make assumptions as well.
Wow. You really have been charting change. I think that if I were to create a visual of what 2024 was like, it was as if your desk was kind of messy and you knew you were going away. I have this tendency if I'm going away, business trip, vacation, and my desk is kind of messy, which it typically is not, but if it is, I will do everything I can to clean up my desk, clean up my inbox, get projects out, make sure that everything is clean and set before I leave and I come back and I have a blank slate. And I feel as if 2024 was like that for a lot of organizations. They know it's coming. And maybe it didn't come to them in some holistic fashion, but it's coming and they're preparing. And whether that's data hygiene or staffing or some kind of infrastructure change, I think people recognize that whatever change is coming is really afoot and they need to be prepared. So they may not be perceived as sort of innovating, but they are doing what innovators need to do in advance. And that's the sense that's really the sense that I've
Yeah.
gotten. I just hosted I do an annual roundtable of CEOs in legal services and legal technology. and spoke with a number of individuals, all dynamically kind of helping their organizations and their clients. And I think there was a real theme there of people sort of iteratively making a move and emphasizing how small changes can have a big impact. And I feel like if that was a way to characterize 2024, it would be that. It's that you don't need dramatic change to alter the trajectory of your organization or your career. Small changes that build up can be quite powerful.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's spot on from my conversations. Is that found? Yeah, I like the analogy, and I bet you our desks look quite different, Ori. I'm just, um, so, but yeah. So anyway, just holding up. It doesn't work with audio. Number of items that are just lo loitering on my desk. But I like that analogy, and I think yeah, that's spot on. But for me, it was interesting about this whole testing and working out that they have to have everything in place. You know, like I actually spoke to Yvonne Dornick from eSentio. She's been doing her own lots of, they do monthly CIO roundtables. So they've been really gauging the temperature and getting lots of feedback from CIOs. And they've got this sort of readiness assessment, which they talked to me about for my last Orange Rag newsletter of the year, which is now out. And it's like this four-prong assessment talking about, is your data ready? Are your people ready? And talking about security. It's she said, you know, that you have to have, you know, often you can get a fudge away, can't you? You can get away with, you know, oh, we'll just do this. But she said, really, you do need everything in place. And I think that's perhaps goes back to your analogy. You need that clean slate. You need everything to be in place, which is, you know, it's hard work, right? It's really hard work. So I guess next year, you know, will everyone suddenly be into production? No. I expect we'll probably also have ahead of ahead of schedule expectations. But I think we'll see a lot of exciting stuff in production. You know, I think it was especially towards the second half of next year. When I spoke to Mike Haven, who was global head of ops at Intel and is now actually he'll have been there one day, started this week at Meta. Um, he was saying that they've been doing some really cool stuff with firms, you know, in the sandbox. So you know, and that's interesting as well. That the fact that they're doing it in partnership. You know, that I spoke at the European Legal Technology Association conference last week in Paris, and there was one session, or there's some focus during the day, and one session on how this is going to change the dynamic of in-house and private practice. Obviously, we keep coming back to that. And there's definitely a sense that that Gen AI will mean that in-house teams take back work from private practice. That was a recurring theme. But what's interesting is also the partnerships that we're seeing, and I think that would be really interesting to see what comes out of that as well.
So I hosted the last legal tech mafia breakfast in Manhattan of the year back on December 11th. And it was almost like a debate of what the changes are going to be in legal service. I'm thinking of kind of adding a debate component because we had 30-ish people, all leaders in the space. It was very interesting. Usually people based in New York, but there are people who I've tried my very best to try to plan these a little bit more in advance. And so as a result, I can tell people and they can maybe plan if they're going to be in the city on a one day of the week, they'll come in on the day where I'm having a breakfast. And so I felt like I had that serendipity this last breakfast. And there was a discussion about, as you say, corporate legal departments doing more work. And someone suggested, yes, but I think there'll be a $10,000 billable hour. And then someone else said, well, lawyers, the ownership of law firms in the United States is changing because there are jurisdictions where people who are not lawyers can have an ownership stake. And then someone said, that's that's so far from reality. That number is very limited and it's such a limit. And it was just really interesting to see that we are still pretty far from kind of universal agreement on lots of these issues, many of which have nothing to do with generative AI. And even when someone says, what do you think is happening before generative AI? I'm thinking, oh, automation is let's focus on automation because there was someone at the breakfast who was talking about robotic process automation and that being used much more readily for smaller law firms or law firms that have a lot of paperwork, and then the idea of data hygiene. So there are all these things that have to happen in advance of this massive revolution. But I remember seeing Nikki Shaver of Legal Tech Hub speak at Lexpo in Amsterdam, and she made a really good point. I forget who she was quoting, but she made a really good point that change doesn't necessarily happen immediately as you would expect it to. It happens slowly and kind of quietly, and then immediately. And it was a very interesting connection to where we are now. And I've thought about it many times since that event, which I highly recommend, incidentally, to anybody who's listening. I'm a huge fan. I've been there 5 times and am honored to be returning in June. So great
Ari's the
event. I'm
chair
excited.
for anyone who
Yeah.
doesn't know.
Rob and Mirun and his they run it and they own it. I am merely the MC and also the host of the Rise and Run, which is something I feel really proud of, I have to say. And the one thing I will say, Caroline, I've been thinking a lot about. I'm sure at this time of year you do this too, just like what was the year like? As you say, for planning purposes, I really try to think about next year in November. Not for
Yeah,
anything neurotic. It's just that you need to give yourself lead time. You need to give yourself grace. You can't give yourself grace if you start thinking about next year the week before next year starts. But if you
yeah.
start thinking about next year 8 weeks in advance, 9 weeks in advance, it will give you an opportunity to pause, on a walk, on a plane, on a train, to think, oh, is that a good idea? Let me try it. Let me send it to someone I trust who's going to give me the benefit of the doubt if the idea isn't very good. But if you do it a week before you need it, it becomes very manic and stressed, and I don't really need that in my life. So, but I have been thinking a lot about the runs that I do. I do these runs at conferences, as you know, and someone asked me if I would add a walk component. So I'm making a commitment
Are you
that
doing
the rise
it?
and run will be the rise and run walk. I don't, the challenge with that is I don't lead the walk. And so I don't really know
Why
how
don't you?
to
What? Oh, what? You'll do the
create a
run still,
logistical, right. I'll be the runner.
right?
And should I remain able? And then maybe I'll try to partner with someone at each event for the walk component, because people have said I would do it, but I have to walk, or I prefer to walk. And I'm like, you know what, let's do
I
great. So
would do a walk. I mean,
that's a
I've got some
commitment.
stuff coming up at Legal Week, which is exciting, which we'll talk about next year. So, but I would, if I can, I'd love to do the
Well,
walk because
I
I
guess
love.
to wrap that thought, I just wanted to say that
Yeah,
I think that there's a lot of uh, we've returned to this focus on in-person community building.
yeah, yeah.
It's no longer we are no longer, I think, having this conversation about the pandemic and how liberating it must be for everyone. I don't go to an office every day, but I'm out and about, I guess. And, when I'm not a hermit in my office against my brick wall, I really want to be there. And I think that some of these things demonstrate that, and people really want to be supportive of each other. And I think the run, for example, was just a reflection of
It's
that.
that's a really nice. It's really nice you bring it up on the last one of the on our last podcast of the year because that has been a feature throughout the year, hasn't it? We've talked about it many times with different conferences, and you've done a great job of bringing people together. And I love seeing the pictures, and I think I agree that's one of the highlights. We've talked a lot about events over the year, and it is so great always to see people in person. And I look forward to more of that next year for sure. I think it's one thing I would say that is that I think people are really tired. Like I know that they're always tired, but and I don't know whether you feel that people are more exhausted. I feel like it's so busy that you do. I love your idea about planning ahead, and I've been trying to adopt that. And I think managing your own wellness needs to continue to be a massive theme. I've focused on that myself throughout this whole year. I've cut back on some things like I shouldn't confess to occasionally smoking, but I was. I probably shouldn't say that in public. Delete that if my children ever listen to this. But no, but with a glass of wine, I was, and I haven't since the summer, and doing loads more, going to the gym more, and not drinking during the week, mostly apart from December. It's gone a bit out of the window, but just and noticing the difference of that. I can't even tell you, like feeling the benefits of that massively, like especially going to the gym, and on top of that obviously walking the dog. And I think Those are so important because everybody is so, I don't remember being this busy. Like, I think there's always stuff coming through the door, which is just crazy. And I think looking after yourself needs to be a complete top priority because I don't think next year will be a slowdown. I think it was, I think people will be maybe, I don't know if we could be more busy, but as busy.
So I know this is going to sound like an obnoxious flex, but I think that there are two. I just think that there are two sides to this, which I think are both very powerful. Um, Years ago, I'm trying to think. In 2015, I did my second Ironman, which was in Mont-Tremblant in outside Montreal, and I had a great race. And right after the race, I saw my friend. We were joking around, and then I said, "Oh, just give me 1 second." And then I just threw my guts up. I was so sick. It was so painful. I was so exhausted. I remember I was just like, I was like delirious. I was like, I
Oh
can't believe that just
no.
happened. And I
Oh,
had to get some hot soup, and it was like some magical elixir. It was incredible. It was a salty hot soup, and I felt much better. And we ate and enjoyed the fact that we had finished this. And I feel like people feel like that, like
yeah,
they're at that point of just utter exhaustion,
yeah,
but exhilarated, right? An exhilarated exhaustion. But and at the same time, I think our industry has really, it just feels like we've made some movement towards removing the badge of being busy as a badge of honor. You know, when I practiced for nearly 9 years, and the only answer to any question was to "Are you busy?" is, of course, yes, or "How are you?" The only answer to "How are you?" is busy. That's what it,
right.
busy. And that's what you would say. And I would never leave my office, and I would always pick up a red weld on my desk, even if I was just going to the bathroom or going to make a copy, because I wanted people to see that I was like en route to something very important. And and I think that, it's a very silly, it's a very sort of junior associate kind of technique, but I was just like, I can't leave the office just walking around. People will say, "What are you doing?" I'd be like, if I said I'm busy, what am I
Oh
busy with?
wait.
At least I have the red weld. I know they know, oh, he must be busy with whatever's in that red weld, even if it was empty or filled with blank sheets of paper. So anyway, I think that, I did several programs this year about wellness. Amy Sellers is a leader of the Mind Budget Connection, and her team looking at what about when you're staffing e-discovery teams, what do rates that you pay reviewers reveal about your focus on wellness? I know that at Nuix they had a white paper that came out specifically on wellness and what does automation mean for enhancing the opportunities that team members. I just think it's been great. And I think, as you're saying,
Mm.
I attribute it for me personally to age, to thinking, you need to sleep, you need to
Yeah.
exercise. And I'm a big fan of apps that prompt you to keep a streak going. And I think that if anybody's listening and they're trying to figure out, how do I try to accomplish something next year, I wouldn't say I'm uber accomplished, but I definitely get things done. And one of them is I have this thing about streaks. Like, I've been playing guitar for like 94 weeks straight. I'm a poor guitar player, but I'm better than I was 94 weeks ago. And,
Oh,
I use the Peloton app, and that app kind of tracks your days, and it's these sort of silly things. But if your objective is to add something into your portfolio of things, having a streak really matters, but this also tracking things that you like, because
yeah.
we're not here that long. You just really want to be, you know, having your cake and eating it too. Doing good work, working with nice people, doing hard work, maybe feeling exhausted, but also finding satisfaction in that.
I was gonna say we missed a trick. We could have got for the last the last episode of the year. We could have got you on guitar,
Oh, I have been practicing. We
right?
tried that last year and it didn't
We
pick up
did.
on the microphone. That's right. I said that to my wife the other night. I often, so the other thing that I do, which I learned from James Clear in Atomic Habits, because I
Yeah.
love this book. He
Well, we
says,
both love it. Yeah.
yes, he talks about this idea of associating habits. And so I will watch football because
Yeah.
or sports. I like to watch sports, and I've sort of made this deal that if I ever am sitting in this room watching sports, I have to play my guitar while I'm doing it because the
It's
app will
such a
just tell me.
great
And it was
idea.
sort of mindless, but it's, it's
Yeah.
just practicing and fingers and
Yeah.
it's very easy. And so I'll do that. And then order to make sure I do that, you have to kind of bring in the guitar to that room. So it's just
Yeah.
sitting there. And there's all these psychological
I
things that
love all
really
that.
help. But
Yeah.
James Clear, Atomic Habits. I actually, for people who have not read it, I highly encourage you. If you have a masterclass subscription, he has a masterclass in this. But I think the book is great. You can buy it, obviously. You can get it out of your library. I get a lot of books out of my library on my Kindle. I just think it's that
And he
has
was
been
at
one of the most
IltaCon.
transformative books. Yeah. No, he was at CleoCon, wasn't he?
Oh, he was at CleoCon. Of course
Yeah,
he was.
which was you would imagine that he's a CleoCon because Jack is so smart. Like that,
It was so
that's like
cool.
the incredible, an
Yeah.
incredible guest.
So I'm a massive fan, and that thing that you just talked about, he calls habit stacking. And
Yeah.
I've said this to my kids, right? I'm like, if I want to get them to do stuff, I'm like, look, he says things like, if you always brush your teeth, you don't forget to brush your teeth. If you want to also remember to take vitamins, take them before you brush your teeth. Things like it. And when he says it, it's so logical. Anyway, yeah, I saw him at CleoCon. It was so cool, like to see the man himself talking about. I mean, it was quite as you'd expect, it was all the stuff that was in his book, nothing different, but it was very cool. And I agree with you, if anyone hasn't read it, it's an amazing book. It's been transformative for me too, as well as the podcast that we talked about before, the Mindset Mentor. I listened to 2 episodes this morning. It's about, we've mentioned it before, so I won't go into it, but yeah, talking about being either personal stuff like how to stay positive, or about habits, or running a business, or so much stuff. It's just amazing.
Well, I think that people should also recognize, and I think you're seeing firms and law departments do this too. If we're going to just on the James Clear theme, he talks
Mm,
about, these sort of small steps, little things that
yeah.
add to big things. And I think that I'm 51, almost 52. And so I can say this with a little bit of life experience, but if your objective is to be more charitable and you give, $10 a year to something and you started giving $3 a month, you'd be stunned at how much you had given after 30 years, right? Like I just think that, and it's same thing with your personal investments or your exercise. If you walk around the block, I was talking to someone recently who wasn't feeling great, and we were talking about exercise, and she said, "Oh, I want to go to the gym." And they have a lot of weights there and there's a lot of machines, and I find that uh, a terrible experience for me personally. I find that very uncomfortable. That I've never been very comfortable like in a gym lifting weights, as you can tell. And but but I said to her, I said, why don't you start before you start making an investment and getting yourself busy and buying yourself all new clothes, just walk around your block. Just walk around the block once and do it every single since every day she drives somewhere. I was like, every day, either before your drive or maybe after your drive, so you're less nervous and stressed about getting somewhere, do that walk so that you connect it to something. And I just think the power of those small little changes, like
Yeah.
us, I love that we do this, and I want to thank you for doing it with me because we've done 35 episodes, and while they're not first of all, they're totally unscripted. We prepare nothing, as our listener knows, but we have it on our calendars, and sometimes we have to miss. You're away on a Friday, I'm away on a Friday, but we have it at an exact same time. And even though it's been imperfect, we have produced 35 of the most fun hours, half hours, or whatever that I've had. And I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. And I think that there's
Oh,
something to that. And you see a lot of organizations doing this and saying, I we will try this. So maybe they went from no, we will not use whatever the new thing is, the automation tool, the Gen AI tool, the data hygiene tool, the information governance or whatever. And then they said, you know what? Okay, we'll start it with this group and then we'll check in and then we'll expand it a little bit. Then we'll push back. Then we'll have a budget issue. Then the economy will change, but we'll just try to keep pushing forward in some way. And that's always been my mindset, momentum. Try to
yeah.
generate some momentum, whatever that is with your with your family, with your health, with your work, but just like try to chip away to kind of push that ball just a little bit further. And I think over time people don't realize how much progress has it made because they see, just like you see in your personal life or on social media, which I really don't use much of, but you see other organizations and other people that you think are doing more. You don't realize the sort of 2 steps forward, 4 steps back. And
Yeah.
then eventually you just see them ahead. but you didn't see all the times they went ahead and pulled back, and ahead and pulled back, and just sat there and just, put their hands in their on their head and just thought, this isn't going to work.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And thank you, Ari, because it's been, as you say, so much fun. I have a lot to thank you for the sort of you're much more systematic than I am, and that's
Systems
been
over
great for
goals.
me.
I always say
Yeah,
systems
I
over
love it.
goals.
I love it.
So let's
And
yeah.
it's always so much fun, and I look forward to speaking to you, and I can't wait for next year. And our similarly unscripted conversations, which are always so much fun. And to our one listener out there, I hope you have an amazing break and actually manage to take some proper time over Christmas because we will need to recharge. So let's hope that everyone can have some downtime and spend time with family and come back raring to go.
And do something for someone, whatever that looks like. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
we're in that period, and then take that with you. Take that with
Yeah.
you into January and February and August. And I think, should we all be able to do that just a tiny bit? Wow, amazing. How amazing it would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, thank you. Yeah, I have to say we do. I teach my kids that as well. You're always amazing at talking, actually expressing gratitude. I teach my kids, try and teach them various things along the way, just sort of but it's always small things. It's always small, like little things, but it's just that continuous small stuff. Hopefully we can make a difference. Um,
I love it.
I wish you
Caroline
I wish you
Hill.
well.
I I'm so grateful for this time, and to all of you who are listening, you know who I mean. We're really thankful for this, and I look forward to the first episode of the year coming in January, and just look, feel fortunate to chart change in legal and to be in legal and hopefully to remain here for as long as we can. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.